However you are and whenever you are, welcome, good souls, to Paranormal Now. I'm Alan B. Smith. Join us as we traverse the cosmic highway of paranormal portals and tantalizing turnoffs. And yes, tonight we are starting late. My apologies to everyone out there. Thank you for joining us tonight. Yeah, it's New York City, and you know, sometimes it is a magical land of enchantment or a land of chaos, which is what we love about New York City. Of course, now we're in the country life here, so that's still a little bit of getting used to. But I'm happy to be getting used to that clean air, so I don't regret that. Our guest tonight is Rick Doty. We'll get to Rick in just a moment. As a friendly reminder, if you want to join the chat on YouTube, just jump on over there. I'll try to get to your questions as we go. Considering this is a shortened version of tonight's show, maybe we'll bring some of those questions in a little earlier than normally we would. And for all of those out there who are coffee fanatics like myself, please use the Mystery20, all caps, Mystery20 discount code for aliencoffeebean.com coffee roasters. Really, really good coffee. Not to be cliche, but out of this world. All right, so let's get to it. Let's bring Rick Doty on. Rick, welcome to Paranormal Now.
Thank you, Alan. Good to be on your show.
Thank you. Well, you know what? Let's let you give your bio and a little bit of background about what you did at Kirkland Air Force Base, and then as an officer for the New Mexico State Police.
Well, I was born in New York State, upstate New York, near Barton, New York, which is near Elmira.
Okay.
If you want to look on the map.
So you're a New Yorker.
Originally a New Yorker, then moved to Pennsylvania, and then my dad was in the service, so we travel all over. Lived in Germany, different states. Eventually ended up in New Mexico. I entered the regular Air Force, served 4 years, and worked in Special Operations branch of the Air Force. I got out of the Air Force, went to college, Pacific Lutheran University, Tacoma, Washington. Then I joined the government as a counterintelligence officer with the Air Force Office of Special Investigations. I went to a number of different schools in and around Washington, D.C., the AF OSI Counterintelligence and Counterespionage School, the CIA's Counterespionage School, DIA Intelligence Officers Course.
Okay. And
then my first assignment was in New Mexico at Kirtland Air Force Base.
Do you remember what your first assignment was?
My first assignment was in 1978. I was a counterintelligence officer at Kirtland Air Force Base. My job was to monitor all classified programs that were occurring on the base and set up an operation to protect those operations. So set up an operation to protect the classified projects. Okay. And that encompassed working with a number of agencies on the base, and also with some other intelligence units that within the intelligence community. And like I said, our job was to protect classified programs that the Air Force was running, or other agencies that were stationed on Kirtland. So that was my first assignment.
Okay. And how many agencies work together there?
We had on the base, we had United States Army, a military intelligence unit. We had Air Force intelligence. Now, Air Force intelligence is different from the Air Force OSI. The Air Force Office of Special Investigations is who I worked for, was the investigative arm of the Air Force. Okay. It didn't report to any commander, local commander. It reported to the Inspector General of the Air Force. That was our chain of command. So we didn't have to worry about any influence or unauthorized influence by a local commander. So we could do our thing, conduct our investigations, and report it up the chain of command to the Inspector General of the Air Force. We worked with the Defense Intelligence Agency had an office on base. The National Security Administration had an office on base. So those are the primary agencies I worked for. We worked with, and there were other agencies within the state of New Mexico that we cooperated with. Since we were at Kirtland, we cooperated and asked for assistance sometimes with Albuquerque Police Department. They had their own intelligence unit. Mm-hmm. The New Mexico State Police had an intelligence unit, and some of the local sheriff's departments had intelligence units. So we worked with them off base.
And what kind of projects, aside from, and we'll get to the UFO topic, but besides that, like what other kind of assignments did you have?
One of the most important assignments that a counterintelligence officer has on a base is to protect the base. And so what we did, and I took over for another counterintelligence officer. Mm-hmm. So what we do, we set up a counterintelligence ring around the base, so to speak. We recruit local people to report to us what's occurring around the base perimeter, outside the base. Any threats posed against the base, we want to know before they ever happen.
Sure.
So we recruit people to report to us, and that's called a counterintelligence network. Okay. What we also do is contact and have a good working relationship, sometimes witting and sometimes unwittingly, with the local news media. And we've been criticized a number of times for recruiting local news people mm-hmm. to report to us any stories that they were developing or going to report on information about the base.
Right.
And we had a pretty good system set up. I can't take full credit for it because the counterintelligence officer before me had already set up a fairly good counterintelligence network with the local media and with the citizens that lived around outside of the base.
But those media, do you build a rapport, or are there people already in those media infrastructure that are just willing participants, maybe from the top down?
We both. We sometimes already have sources within the local news media, the television station, television, radio, and newspaper. Sometimes they're executives, mm-hmm. And sometimes they are unwitting in a way that we have to go around about, such as recruiting them for some other reason, but our secret reason is for them to tell us what's going on within the news pertaining to the base.
Okay, so in general, a guesstimation, how much is it about you collecting information? Like what percentage of that versus you disseminating information that you want to seed out there? Or is that really just a case-by-case basis?
Well, we don't disseminate much. we might help a source within the news network to find some information to report later, but we don't disseminate. The actual dissemination of the information comes from the Public Information Officer of the base, PIO, and I have to say that the PIO for the base actually worked for the intelligence community, believe it or not. Some people do believe it, and some people don't. They're very, very, very careful in what they report out without clearing it first with me. I mean, unless it's some mundane thing that had nothing to do or would not affect any type of security on the base.
Okay. So your job when it came to UFOs, like what what was the mission at hand for you? When did this start?
Well, it started an incident that happened in the Coyote Canyon test area, which is on the base, the eastern part of the base. A civilian security guard. Now, first of all, let me preface this with, we had Sandia National Laboratories, a very large defense contractor, on the base. They had all their facilities on the base. They utilized a number of test areas on the base. Other administrative offices, other secret work of buildings on the base. We're on the base. So they had their own.
When you say secret works, like secret access programs, or?
Yeah, there were secret access programs. Sandia Laboratories' primary mission was to develop technologies, non-nuclear technologies for nuclear weapons. For instance, a component inside the weapon, not the actual uranium or plutonium, but just a component that fired the weapon or something like that. They developed and they manufactured those. They also had other missions, some of which are classified, but their primary mission was nuclear weapons maintenance and developing new devices for the nuclear weapons to advance the nuclear weapons program.
Did you like your job?
I loved it.
Did you enjoy
yes.
it? Yeah.
Yes, yeah. I did. It was like living a dream, so to speak. Something new happening every day. There was actually supposed to be two of us. The other counterintelligence officer was diverted on another assignment, so he eventually showed up. But I was on my own for about 15 months before he showed up.
Yeah.
But anyways, getting back to the story of Coyote Canyon. Coyote Canyon was an area east of the base on the base proper, but in a canyon. The Coyote Canyon was used to conduct tests on nuclear weapons, non-nuclear testing, and other classified testing. A security guard, a Sandia security guard, a civilian guard, not a military guard, worked for Sandia Laboratories, was patrolling the area one night, one early morning, actually, and he saw an object, which he later described as a flying saucer, land at one of their classified bunkers in that area. And as he approached this object, his vehicle shut off, all his electronics shut off, his portable radio shut off, and he was stuck out there without any communications. And of course, he had a weapon, he had a handgun, he had a shotgun, and he watched this thing land. He watched something occurring near the front entrance to this bunker.
Okay.
And eventually, the craft left, flew in a southwesterly direction. Now, this isn't very far from Manzano Weapons Storage Area. And Manzano Weapons Storage Area at the time was the largest nuclear weapons storage area in the free world. Thousands of nuclear weapons were stored there. The perimeter and the complex was guarded by Air Force security police or military police. And some of the security policemen on the perimeter of this area saw this object come in and land.
So multiple witnesses here.
Multiple witnesses.
Okay.
Well, the next day, which was a Thursday, one of the chief of security for Sandia contacted me and said, "Hey, Rick, we need to get together. I need to report something to you." And we had a memorandum agreement with Sandia Labs and with some other civilian contractors on the base, such as the Department of Energy. DOE actually had other facilities on base, whereby if they had some kind of a security breach or something to this effect that occurred on the base or in their area, they would notify me. So he notified me of what happened. Later that afternoon, I interviewed the security guard. He was a former Army helicopter mechanic. He'd been working for Sandia for about 10 years. Clean record. I mean, he had a security clearance, which is a Q clearance, meaning he had access to nuclear material. He knows, since he was a helicopter mechanic, he knows what a helicopter looks like. He guaranteed me this wasn't a helicopter. He didn't know what it was, but he referred to it during our conversation and during his written statement in his oral interview that it was a flying saucer. I took all the information that he gave me. Let me go back a little bit. At this time, I was not briefed into any special access program with the Air Force regarding UFOs or ETs or anything like that. In fact, at no time during my training, which lasted about 9 months, was I ever was the subject of UFOs or ETs mentioned, except for one small, probably a 15-minute lecture by a Air Force officer that said that you may at times receive reports of UFOs, and you need to refer to this particular manual of what to do. And that was it. That was the entire briefing at that time.
But you weren't primed for UFOs or extraterrestrials, but you were primed for the nuclear security. That when you say Q clearance, is that like something that is common used within intelligence, or is that specific to certain agencies?
No, that's particular to anyone that have access with nuclear material or nuclear storage areas. They have to have nuclear. It doesn't have anything to do with. We'll get into the other Q program in a minute, but just a Q without a number in front of it is has to do with nuclear material.
Okay.
And so I took a report later that afternoon. Lieutenant Colonel Ernie Edwards, who was the chief of security for Monsanto, he called me that late afternoon and told me some of his men, some of his security personnel saw something out in Coyote Canyon. So on Friday afternoon, I got those three airmen together and interviewed them separately. I mean, I brought them in, interviewed them separately, and they told me what they saw. They didn't know what it was. They knew it landed someplace out there, but it was they referred to it as unconventional aircraft. It wasn't anything they'd seen. They knew what airplanes were. They knew what helicopters were, and this object that landed out there was not any of those.
Well, okay, so you're saying unconventional aircraft, right? But then someone else says flying saucer. Those could be two totally different things. So, of all the different witnesses that reported to the to Sandia security head, did they pass any other descriptives on to you of what they saw?
Well, yeah, the person that actually witnessed that was close to it was the Sandia security guard. He described the object as circular, completely circular, and he said it was like a flying saucer. Had a bulge on the bottom of it, a bulge on top, emitted bluish. He called them tinkling lights. No white lights, just bluish lights.
Right. Yeah.
He saw it land. He saw it come down, but he didn't actually see it touch the ground. And one reason for that is because of the position of his vehicle. He had an angular view of it, and he couldn't actually tell. And this is in a very remote area, and there was some brush and things in front of it, so he couldn't actually see it land or sit on the ground. When we went out there later, the following week, we went out there and he showed me the area, showed me exactly where his vehicle's parked. I could see why he couldn't actually see it land. He didn't know whether it landed or not. But as we examined the ground, we saw some protrusions into the ground, and we also saw some. There wasn't any grass out there; it was all dirt. But I saw burnt marks on the dirt. on top of the dirt. And of course, I took that as samples, and we submitted to a laboratory and so forth. So at that time, I began to wonder if it wasn't something we had. I mean, Kirtland Air Force Base at that time had a number of classified projects occurring.
Mm-hmm.
And one of them was the drone program. We had back in 1979, the Air Force began experiment with different types of drones. So my first thought was, oh, this is an Air Force drone. That's what I thought.
Drone, would that be the UAV category?
Yes, UAV category. And so when I got back and I did a report, a CI report, and submitted it,
Mm-hmm.
Probably a couple of days later, my boss came in to me. My boss was a civilian at GS-14, and he said, "Hey, Rick," he said, "you need to go over to the Air Force Special Security Office, AFSO, and get briefed into a special program." I said, "Okay, what's it about?" He said, "Just go and get it. Go tomorrow at 8:00 in the morning or whatever time, 8 or 9,
Mm-hmm.
and see a Air Force colonel, and he'll brief you." I said, "Okay." So I'm thinking it's something. Now, I had access to everything that was occurring on the base. All the classified programs I knew about. I had been briefed into because that was my job.
When you say
except for this one.
When you say all, like all that the base was assigned to cover?
Yes, I was supposed to have access to everything. Now we'll get into that a little bit later.
So this was this something then that was going on that you were supposed to have access to, but you're now just learning about?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
When I got over there, we went into a secure facility,
Mm-hmm.
a bubble, very secure room. There were a number of other people in this room. And the first thing the colonel started out with is, "I'm going to change your belief in God." That's what he said. That's how he started it.
Okay.
And he said, "I'm not joking. Everything you see, everything you hear in this room is 100% truthful. This isn't an exercise, a military trick.
Yeah.
Everything you see, the film that you're about to see, the statements that you hear from me is factual." So,
and did it change your belief in God?
well, somewhat. I mean, it makes you wonder.
Uh-huh.
But anyways, he says, "I'm going to brief you on this plan," and there's a number, which will mean nothing to anybody, but it has to do with the United States government's investigation and contact with extraterrestrial beings. And that's almost verbatim.
That's pretty big.
And then he showed us a film. The film was it was about a 35-minute film.
Mm-hmm.
It started out with a colonel, an Air Force colonel, sitting in an office, explaining the classifications, the special access programs, all the administrative things that you have to understand before you actually get access to something. Just paperwork stuff. And we had to, sign a form and all this stuff. Anyway, and then from there, it went into, he said, the colonel on the film says, "You're about to witness a film of a recovery of an unidentified flying object, which we later determined it to be an extraterrestrial craft in New Mexico."
Mm-hmm.
Now, this colonel is not in New Mexico. He's on the film. So then it goes into the recovery and the actual Roswell incident, the real Roswell incident, where the crash occurred. The actual craft itself,
Corona.
landed in Corona. The debris trail from the antenna on this craft landed south of Corona towards Roswell. And what we were told and what we saw was that there were two extraterrestrial crafts flying over New Mexico in the summer of 1947.
Mm-hmm.
We had picked these things up on radar. And at that time, there was only two places that had radar. At Roswell Army Airfield had
Mm-hmm.
radar. And there was also a radar complex, a classified radar complex up near Los Alamos. Now, that was classified right up until 2013, but it's not classified anymore.
Okay.
Well, both those radar complexes tracked something on radar. But back in those days, our radar was pretty crude. I mean, we had it. We developed it during World War II. Anyways, it identified two crafts, unknown origin, unknown types, and then they disappeared from radar. We found an archaeological team found the chronocraft. Brazel and Marcel, their story is they reported finding debris.
Right.
That debris was the antenna off the two crafts.
Yeah, I mean, I'm familiar with the archaeological story, but I think a lot of people have doubt about that. There were witnesses that saw a team and then poof, gone. Did you see any footage of that yourself?
Yeah, we didn't see the footage of it. Obviously, there wasn't anybody there to film the archaeological team finding it. But the recovery of the craft itself was, it's there. I mean, it's Army 1947 style film, black and white. We saw a picture of Truman there, Air Force, Army officials. Remember, the Air Force hadn't been organized at that time. It was just Army Air Force.
Okay.
We saw the craft, saw the bodies, and then the story is that they recovered it. They took it to Wright Pat, and then they brought it back to Los Alamos, which at that time was the safest, probably the most secure location in the world to do some analysis of it. The bodies were transported to Los Alamos because Los Alamos at that time had the only cryogenic facility that could house them. Now, later on, they were transported to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. They actually built some cryogenic facilities in Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Ohio. But that was a year and a half or so later.
I was going to say, yeah, they built these specifically for the aliens. Was their tech already in existence or under development for something like that?
The cryogenics part of it was because Los Alamos had it. They created it because of the bomb. They needed the cryogenics to facilitate some operational mechanisms of a nuclear bomb. So they developed the cryogenics, and I don't have the history of that, but I know that Los Alamos had a facility. According to the film, one live ET was found at the crash site. He was transported to Kirtland Field. He was transported to a hospital in Albuquerque, but then immediately, within hours, realizing this was not a human being, it was they call it an extraterrestrial biological entity. They transported it to Los Alamos. They built a special facility for him at Los Alamos over the years.
Yeah.
So that's the Roswell craft. Now the second craft crashed.
Is all, sorry, Rick. This is all one film.
Yes, one film.
That's a long. It sounds like a long film.
Well, it's narrated in a summation type of. I mean, they didn't go into great details on everything, but the second craft was found way west of Socorro, New Mexico, on Horse Mesa, by a rancher, very, very remote area of New Mexico. He found the craft, didn't know what it was. He was moving his cattle up to another pasture. He thought it was something that fell out of the sky. He had no idea what it was. Now, this is 1949. So it took him 2 days to get back to his ranch to utilize a telephone. and he called the Catron County Sheriff, reported it to the sheriff. Well, a week goes by, actually 8 days goes by before the sheriff came out with a deputy, and they managed to make it up there. When the sheriff got up there, the sheriff realizes this is something that he'd never seen before, and so he needs to call the government. So they call the Army at Kirtland Base, and about 12 to 15 days later, a convoy went up there and recovered that craft. Now, the ETs that were piloting that craft were all dead. They were inside, and their bodies had deteriorated. And they brought that craft back to Kirtland with the other one. And so we had an ET in captivity from 1947 to 1952. We called him Eva. It was a male. And in this film, they don't go into a lot of details about the ET, but they do show a picture of him. And they eventually were able to communicate. And during the communications process, he explained to them in his own terms, because remember, he has no knowledge of our society, our math, our science. So in rudimentary way, he explained things to us.
Okay,
and,
Rick, let's hold it there. We'll get back with the EBE story and so much more to cover. And I have so many questions for Rick, and I know you do too as well. This is Alan B. Smith for Paranormal Now on the Paranormal Pop YouTube channel, rebroadcast on KUNX DB at 2 a.m. on Sundays. I love being a part of the KUNX family. I will see you all on the inverted upside down. This coffee is delicious. Is that a UFO? I'm actually seeing a UFO. This coffee is awesome. That's why they call it alien coffee bean. Is this even made on Earth? Hey all. Paranormal Now will be syndicated on the UnX network, the new mainstream, where you can find your favorite hosts and shows on the cutting edge of ufological and paranormal news and topics. Listen for Paranormal Now rebroadcast on the X at 2 a.m. EST Fridays, 11 p.m. PST Thursdays at unxnetwork.com. Welcome back to Paranormal Now. This is Alan B. Smith, your grateful host, coming at you live from youtube.com/paranormalpop, rebroadcast on the KUNX network. And taking us out of the break was music by Septembrio. If you like their music as much as I do, you can check them out at Septembrio, spelled with a Y.com. All right, and some other really exciting news that I didn't get to because we had to jump right into this in the beginning was the fact that Half-Light documentary, my little passion project that I've been working on for about a year and a half now, will premiere this Saturday, April 30th at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 6 p.m. Pacific Time. So I hope you all join me for that premiere. I'll be there in chat as well. there's 12 different participants who are paranormal researchers, ufological researchers, podcasters, experiencers in that documentary. And I think that all of you who love these topics and high strangeness as much as I do will appreciate it. So I hope I'll see you there on Saturday. And also earlier on Saturday, I'll be a part of the observation deck panel alongside Tracy Garbutt and Stephen Bassett. And also that day is Richard Dolan, Ray Szymanski, Daniel Sheehan, and DJ Francois. So it'll be a fun Saturday all day long for me. So I hope I will see you out and about in ufological land. All right, we're back with Rick Doty. Rick, so let's pick it up with the EBE story. And before we do, I have a really great question from chat that I wanted to bring up. This is from UFOT. I wonder why the ET's bodies were not quarantined. There are never any details about anyone being quarantined who were around them. It would seem like that would be in the protocols.
Yeah, exactly. I did at the time of the briefing. They didn't mention anything about a quarantine, but later on, I learned that they did. The people that recovered the bodies, the Army, Air Force personnel that recovered the bodies, the physicians, the scientists, they all had suits on, proper suiting, and a mask on.
Okay.
And they took samples of the bodies, and they took samples of ET of the EBA-1. So yeah, that protocol was followed, even crudely back in those days. At the time of the briefing, we didn't mention anything about the
right.
protocol.
And how do you have protocols for extraterrestrials if this is your first encounter with such a thing?
Exactly.
Previous to this, are you aware of the government, other than beginning with Kenneth Arnold, having any other interest or awareness of visitors from off planet?
At the time of the briefing, they didn't mention anything other than that. In fact, the colonel mentioned this was our first contact with an extraterrestrial race. Now, people are going to jump all over and say, "Oh no, in 1939 and 1923 and 18, they're going to give me all sorts." And I've been through this over the years at UFO conventions where they bring forth examples of things that are occurring. Well, I'm just telling you what I knew and what I was told in 1979. Now, there could and I think what I know now, after all these years, I think there actually were other instances of a contact we had with an ET race, but it wasn't a formal government contact. I mean, it wasn't actually contacted with our government like this thing was.
Like contact, like in the same place contact, or are we talking about technology?
No. We're talking about a craft that crashed someplace, and the locals didn't know what to do with it, didn't report it. Maybe wrote it up in a newspaper.
Yeah.
Something to that effect.
Well, Rick, I have to ask you this too, because I ask everyone the same question. And why is it that UFOs historically have crashed in non-populated areas? I mean, why doesn't a UFO crash in a densely populated city or nearby?
I wish I knew that. I have no idea why. I'm not a scientist. Actually, my degree's in political science and education, and I taught school mathematics before. So I don't know. I mean, that's a good question, but there are reasons. And another question that I'm sure somebody's going to ask you or ask me, they do this all the time on almost every interview, every podcast, is this race of ETs came thousands of light years or hundreds of light years or 50 light years or 10 light years to visit Earth, and they crash. Why are they crashing? Well, there's very smart scientists. Dr. Hal Puthoff is one of them, and most people know Dr. Hal Puthoff, a very brilliant scientist. I actually worked for him at the Institute for Advanced Studies. He comes up with an excellent theory, is that these crafts are coming from their planet traveling through a void or vacuum, a space, and then coming into our planet. Now, their planet might not have the Van Allen belts. Their planet probably might not have lightning. And actually, EBA 1 explained that what happened was their instruments malfunctioned because of the lightning. During the time that those two crafts were flying over New Mexico in July of 1947, there was a severe lightning storm. Now, if you have technology, if you raised in a technology, advanced your technology without lightning, lightning can do all sorts of things to electronics. And so, I mean, and they aren't a Superman race, and their craft don't have Superman technology. So what happened, as far as we feel that happened, at least what I saw in the film, is that they crashed. The crafts crashed. One landed near Corona, the other landed in Horse Mesa, and we believe it was because of the lightning.
Okay.
So,
and you mentioned radar earlier. I've always thought that, because especially radar in the early days was rather, crude. It was hot. Could that have been strong enough to affect instruments?
That's possible. There was some research done on that, and like I said, I don't have all the technical knowledge, but I think that's been brought up as a possible a reason too.
So EBA is real. You're telling us that there was a real alien captured. You believe this?
Well, absolutely. I mean, I saw it. I have no reason to doubt what I saw, the briefing. I mean, I wasn't the only one. There's been other people come forth over the years, received the same briefing that I did. And I have no reason to doubt what I saw wasn't real. In fact, over the years, my next 10 years in counterintelligence, the movie I saw, I proved it by cases that I investigated over the years, that what I saw in that film is factual, that we are being visited, because it didn't just mention Roswell, it mentioned other crashes, the Kingman crash, two other crashes that no one seems to know anything about but the government, two that crashed in Nevada, one that crashed in Wyoming. Those were recovery operations and they were in the 50s, and one in the 60s, or two in the 60s, and that the Air Force down aircraft, a DART team. It's called a Down Aircraft Recovery Team, and those teams were formed in the 50s and 60s, even probably have them today, to recover down aircrafts, whether they be something that we know, such as an Earth aircraft from a foreign country, or an unknown from someplace else.
So what else did you learn from the EBE, extraterrestrial biological entity, which you refer to as EBA?
Well, the only thing the film said was that he provided technology to us. They didn't go into details of what the technology was. Okay. Later on, during my career, I found that the craft had an energy device. It was a rectangular shaped, thick device that we thought, that at the time that was recovered at the crash site, the scientists thought it was a window. But in actuality, it was an actual energy device. He explained that to us, to the scientists. And they also had this box that had little protrusions on it. And that was their communications device. And we could not understand the technologies of these two devices. In fact, in the late 40s and the 50s, we exhausted every means of trying to understand. Now, remember, EBA 1 died in 1952. And so he wasn't around to try to help us figure out what these things were.
I see. Okay. Was this device on EBA, or was it just recovered from the craft? Was it?
No, it was recovered from the crash site.
Okay, because I imagined it was perhaps something like a cell phone, or their version of that.
No, they had. Now there was a communicator, but uh, we figured that out pretty early on, as I was told.
Hmm.
That it was a small box, and it was a form of person to person communications,
Okay.
and I think we figured that out sometime in the '60s or something. But yeah,
What?
he had a personal communications device on him, and I think uh, somebody. I think Linda Howell, one of Linda Howell's contacts, explained that a lot more than I could in details.
Would Eba have been aware of? And this is coming from a question from Android Purity. I'm kind of building on this. Would they have been aware of crashes like the 1897 crash of Aurora, Texas, if that was in fact a UFO? Wouldn't this being be aware of previous visitations or crashes? And if so, did he share everything that he knew?
Again, I didn't debrief him. I don't know everything that he provided.
Sure.
Just a summary of what he did. I never heard anything about his knowledge of other crashes, but he did state, and this was easily understood by our scientists. Now,
Hmm.
let me go back a little bit. There was an Air Force captain that was assigned to him as his handler, and that captain stayed with him from late 1947 right up until the day he died.
Hmm.
And that captain, Linda Howell, interviewed him some years ago. This captain was he knew everything about Eba. He lived with him. They were able to communicate. And so there was a lot of things he told us that is probably a highly classified, even maybe even today. But one
Mm.
thing he did tell us that his people, his race, this for a lot of years. Now, another
Rick, you
thing you
broke
got
up
to,
for a second. Can you repeat that?
yeah, he said that his race have been visiting our area of space
Okay.
for many years. Now, he didn't use the word years because remember their time and our time is entirely different. But what they did was they explained to him what a year was. They explained astronomy, very brilliant. Now, Ebo 1 was very, very brilliant, probably a high Q of 180, 190, maybe even 200.
That's
And
just
once,
your guesstimation,
yeah,
though.
yeah, just my guess.
Okay.
But once they explained our science to him, our timetable to him,
Hmm.
he grasped that. And
Okay.
then we figure based on what he told us that they've been visiting Earth for about 2,000 years.
I have a question from Anonymous. How was the ET determined to be male?
They have a production reproduction system like ours. They have a male. They have males and females,
That
and
begs the question
he
then.
was the male.
That begs the question then: are we related?
Now that's something that I wish I knew. I know the government determined DNA on him.
Hmm.
That's been uh, even leaked to some people over the years. So, uh, no one ever told me that. I mean, but based on what I've learned, not in the government, but later on,
Hmm.
I believe we are somehow. If they've been visiting us
Yeah.
for 2,000 years, and they had active they had active uh, contact with the human beings for we don't know how many years, other than going back 2,000 years. There could be some form of exchanging DNA. I would say
I
now.
mean, true. Although on the scale of evolution, 2,000 years isn't very much, right? I mean,
No, no,
we
yeah,
were
exactly.
hominins way before
Yes,
that.
yes.
Yeah.
But we know, and then another thing he told us, which is they didn't go into great details in the film, but he told us there had been uh, 10 other races of ETs that have been visiting Earth
Right.
for a long time. Now, he didn't say 2,000 years or anything like that, but so we knew at that time in 19 when he was being interviewed that there were 10 other races visiting Earth. Now, he drew maps. I mean, there were hundreds of maps and star charts and things that he had drawn that are probably still classified, that I don't know that we could actually understand them, because if you're taking a if he's from Zeta Reticuli, which we pretty sure he is, and he's drawing a star chart from his planet, it would look a lot different from our planet. So I don't know that we've understood all of them, but he actually pinpointed where these other alien races were located because of their exploration of space, and he identified himself as a space explorer.
Do you recall the closest planet to Earth? Exoplanet.
It was
or system.
It was close. Our closest star. Can't think of it right
Centauri.
now. Centauri, yeah. Centauri.
Proxima B, I think, is
Proxima B.
We're looking at right
Centauri.
now.
Yeah.
So, you mentioned Linda Moulton Howe, and of course, obviously, there's all that controversy around the counterintelligence aspect of information that was given to Bill Moore and to Linda Moulton Howe, and so on and so forth. So, before we move into that, can you clarify the difference between disinformation, counterintelligence, and then bring us up to date to where you started working with Bill Moore?
Well, the difference between counterintelligence and disinformation, it's just the way a project is run. Mm-hmm. You won't see any word. You won't see the word disinformation in the counterintelligence manual, which is classified. You're not going to see that. But the way that an operation is run to protect a project, we provide disinformation in order to hide the truth.
So,
I mean, if we had the Paul Benowitz is a classical case, which I'm sure we're going to talk about, but that's a classical case of he had access to something that we wanted him to believe was UFO related and not really what he delved into.
Right. Well, for everyone listening, I just want to clarify, if you're not familiar with Paul Benowitz, he was an engineer working out in Albuquerque, New Mexico. He came across some signals, right, that he believed were extraterrestrial. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And then what happened? Where did you step into that equation?
Well, Paul Benowitz lived right outside the perimeter of the Kirtland Air Force Base in an area called Four Hills. Actually, we're same place in the area where my parents lived. He lived right outside the base. He also lived not within about 6 miles of Manzano storage area and Coyote Canyon. He started filming things that were flying around the base. Okay. He also was picking up strange signals. Now, Paul Benowitz was a member of AFPRO, which was predecessor to MUFON.
The Lorenzen's brainchild.
Lorenzen's brainchild, right? Yep. He'd been an investigator for MUFON for many years, going back to the 60s. So he already believed in UFOs. Okay, so he went to I mentioned this name earlier, Lieutenant Colonel, who was chief of security, Ernie Edwards, was chief of security for Manzano. He went to him and he said, "Listen, I'm a civilian. I live outside the base, and I took all these pictures, and I also think that there's something going on in the base that's trying to jam your electronics." Now, Paul Benowitz was a defense contractor. He owned a company called Thunder Scientific Labs right outside the front gate of Kirtland. He made sensors, humidity sensors and other sensors for submarines. He had a DoD industrial security clearance, so he knew classified. He was a Navy, a very distinguished Navy pilot. He's a scientist, a physicist. So Ernie Edwards listened to him and said, "Well, can you come out to my office?" So, anyways, he goes out to the office. He tells Ernie all this stuff. He gives him the pictures. And this is about 3:30 in the afternoon. And Ernie immediately got on phone to me and he said, "Rick, I got a red challenge." Now, a red challenge over the telephone meant something very seriously jeopardizing the security of the base. It's a top priority. Immediate actions required. If you look in the manual. I said, "Okay, where you at?" And he said, "I'm at the office." I said, "Are you at Manzano or are you at your office on the base cantonment area?" He said, No. I'm on the base on cantonment area." So immediately I jumped in, and I was only 2 minutes away from him. I jumped in my OSI vehicle and drove over there, and he laid this stuff out to me. He said, "What the heck is this stuff?" And these pictures of these objects flying around airplanes. And he says, and then he gave me these charts of signals. Well, I'm not technical. We have people that can understand all that, our technical security wizards. So I said, "Well, I don't know, but let me go, take this stuff. You got, what's this guy's name?" He gives me his card. He said, "Here's his card." He runs Scientific Laboratories. So I immediately go back to the base. I am required by manual, by law, by military standards, to immediately send a message up. I only have 30 minutes to send a message up. It's just a summation of what I did. That, and then I started checking up on him, and we do what we call a DCII, like it's almost like an NCII check, finding everything I can, and I find everything within about a 30-minute period. Now I had other people helping me, and these pictures that I'm looking at, I know what they are. They're drones. Back in those days, we were experimenting with drones. And the only way that we could control the drones back in those days was we would launch an aircraft, normally a EC-135, and then launch the drones out of the aircraft and control them by inside the aircraft. And the aircraft had to be close to the drones back in those days.
So you're saying that Paul Benowitz saw drones? He
saw drones. Okay. Now it gets a lot more deeper here, and then as far as the signals that he was collecting, I went to our technical services people and I said, "What is this? Tell me what this is." And they're looking at it and they said, "This is high frequency signals. This is something that is satellite frequencies." And back in those days, this is 1980. So I didn't know what it was, and they couldn't really tell what it was. So anyways, I made an appointment to go out and talk to Paul. And in the meantime, I get this 5-page teletype message come back, immediate, which is almost, it's the next highest priority of a message you can get from your headquarters.
Okay.
Which is classified, and it's classified top secret. And it's classified, and the code is 7 lambs, and I know then it's something big. So I read it, and it's telling me what to do, and it's giving me a plan, an operations plan. This is what you need to do. You need to go out and talk to him, and you get everything. So I do exactly what I'm told to do, and I meet Paul the next day. Paul is an open-minded, open-armed person, as gentle as a lamb. Just kind, gave me everything I asked for. And I built a very, very good relationship with Paul Benowitz.
So you guys, you trusted him and he trusted you.
Yes. And what I had to do, according to the plan, was convince him that what he was seeing was UFOs.
Did you tell him this is what you're seeing, or
No,
did you
I couldn't do that. We have ways of doing it. I mean, there's manuals, there's hundreds of pages of manuals written about how you do these things.
Mm-hmm.
And we go through in school all sorts of exercises in counterintelligence school. So I said to him, I said, what do you think it is, Paul? I don't know what it is. He said, they're UFOs. They're extraterrestrial crafts. I said, wow. Okay. I said, what do you think they're doing? He said, they're tracking these airplanes that are coming in. He said, he said, this one aircraft, this 135, it has complete control of that aircraft because everywhere that drone goes, the plane goes. Well, it's the opposite. Yeah. But so I just didn't say anything. I just said, wow, okay, yeah, it probably is ETs.
So you kind of let him believe what he was already inclined to believe. And by not denying it, that kind of affirmed for him that's what it was. But there's got to be, I mean, we know that, Paul Benowitz had a very rough life later on, and allegedly eventually committed suicide.
No, he didn't commit suicide.
Allegedly, according to certain circles, right?
Well, I was there, and no, he didn't commit suicide.
So
I would have to argue with you on that.
What happened to him at the end? Because
he had a number of nervous breakdowns. Now, let me tell you about Paul. Paul smoked 5 packs of cigarettes a day. He probably drank 2 quarts of Coca-Cola, and he probably drank 7 cups of coffee.
I'm cool with that.
And so, me too. I mean, but with the Cokes, that much caffeine is not good for you.
Right.
So he did this all his life. And so he had a lot of health problems. So it wasn't any psychological, though he had a nervous breakdown, but it had to do with something not entirely different, but it would take me hours and hours to explain the whole thing. But Paul was influenced by a lot of other people.
Not just you.
Alan Hynek, number one. Alan Hynek brought him a computer monitor. And unbeknownst to us, Alan Hynek had nothing to do with us. And there were other people that influenced him. Other people that came in after the story came out and convinced Paul that there was going to be an alien invasion. Now
you're saying, wait, Alan Hynek? J. Alan Hynek?
Well, Alan Hynek came in and gave him the monitor. Some of Alan's friends, and I'm not going to name him, but they're friends of Alan Hynek, and they were also within AFPRO leadership. Mm-hmm. And they were convinced after listening to Paul that what Paul did was he just wandered into this horrible situation where there's going to be invasion. Now, the signals that I talked about earlier, mm-hmm. Paul tapped into a highly, highly classified project involving the NSA. And this isn't classified anymore. We were able to, in the 1980s, we were able to shoot a laser up in the air mm-hmm. and blind Soviet satellites as they were flying over so they couldn't take a picture. Okay. Now, we didn't have the only laser facility. Other bases had. Area 51 had other bases. So he tapped into that. Now, when he tapped into that, when we figured out the signals, our technical people figured out what signals he was tapping into, I immediately went over to NSA, the security officer out there, mm-hmm. and I said to him, Brad, I said, here's what we got. He said, oh my God, is this guy in jail? I said, whoa, wait a minute. What is this? And he said, well, I can't brief you. And I don't have the authority to brief you into it. So at that point, I didn't know what it was. I knew it had to do with NSA because the frequencies, as I was told by my experts, were satellite frequencies, high gigahertz
So Paul misinterpreted.
right. So he thought it was alien, the signals. So eventually I got briefed into the program and I found out what it was. And I said, oh my God, we can't let anyone know what this is.
Well, that's a big question, Rick. I just have to inject here. So, I mean, did they need to tell you and show you about aliens? Did they need to show you this film in order for you to do your job and kind of mislead or allow Paul to mislead himself? Could you have done that without them sharing, the biggest secret of all time?
Oh, I'm sure I could have, but I wouldn't have probably been as convinced. And there were others that hadn't been. Now the technical people hadn't been briefed in, and they were making fun of the UFO thing until they got briefed in. So no, I probably couldn't. I never analyzed that part of it, but there was a reason for them doing it. There at that time in 1980, there was 122 OSI agents around the world that had the same briefing that I did, was doing the same thing I was doing.
Okay.
So I'm not the only one doing it. And if you've gone to UFO conventions and look in the past, many others have come out and said, yeah, I've done the same thing that Doty did. Not as maybe as the same type of operations, but yeah. So yeah, I think I could have done it, but I could have completed my work, my duties, but I think it assisted me into really, really getting into and asking the right questions with that briefing.
How do you deal with that emotionally, or maybe better yet, emotionally? Because I understand, you're working for the government and you're doing your job and you're following orders, like many people throughout history have done. But then sometimes we look back and we question the decisions made by our politicians or by the military or our higher ups. Do you ever regret doing and following those orders?
Absolutely. I've had epiphanies. I've had I've thought about this over and over and over again over the years.
Yeah.
At the time I was doing it, I was doing my job. I was doing what I was told to do. I did exactly what I was told to do, with some leniency in my operational planning. Everything the government does is by a plan. Now, anybody who's ever been in the military knows that you're not going to do anything without a plan, especially something as highly technical and highly classified as this is. Yeah. So the plan's coming down from headquarters. I don't make these plans up. I don't make things up as I go. But I have the opportunity to interject some operational planning into this operation. I'll read the plan and I'll say, you know what, it's easier because I'm down here and they're up there in Washington. I might say it's easier to do it this way rather than going 1, 2, 3. Let's go 9, 10, 11. And let's do it that way. And most of the time they'll say, yeah, okay, you can do it that way. Most of the time. On this operation, I had to do it by the letter of the plan. Every time I try to interject something, they would say, absolutely not. We're not going to do that because it could get out. You get too many people involved. And so it's okay. And now
it reminds me of Lou Elizondo too. A lot of people, they look at, like you said, there's other people who've worked in the government, and they don't trust Lou because they say, well, he's maybe doing some sort of disinformation and what have you. How do you, with your experience, know to trust when another person comes out in the world of ufology and says, hey, I worked for the government, I did X, Y, and Z? How does Rick Doty step back and look at that person and make a decision whether you trust that informant? Or
everyone that had access to this program
Mm-hmm.
knows when I say keywords, they'll know what the keywords are.
Oh, okay.
If somebody said, and I've found
So
so
you're
many.
listening for keywords too, then.
Well, I'll ask him if somebody comes up to me, for instance, at a UFO convention and says, I was in this program with the United States Army, and I did this and this and this and this,
Mm-hmm.
and I'll say, okay, what's the keyword? What's the keyword for your operation?
Huh.
And if he doesn't know it, then that means that he's shooting bull.
So that's
You
to
know,
say that you have keywords plural
yeah. There's
in your
many,
mind. Okay.
because it's compartmented. I
Uh-huh.
didn't know everything. There's no way any. Well, the ones that I worked with, and at
Yeah.
Kirtland there were 6 of us. Uh, we didn't know it all. In fact, I didn't know anything about alien abductions for a couple of years after I was dealing with them.
Okay. So
When
you just
so
dropped the bomb there, Rick. So wait, you believe in alien abductions are real phenomena as well?
Yeah, I didn't at first. I mean, I've heard him. I had in the Paul Benowitz case.
Yeah.
We had Myrna Hansen brought to us by Leo Sprinkle, and she supposedly was abducted, and all these things happened.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if you listen to what she said, now this lady was a 27-year-old mother, a single mother, 11th grade education, couldn't pick out Mars or anything regarding the space or the universe. She didn't know anything about flight, but she told us things that she was abducted, and she told us things about a particular place that she was taken to.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this is going to blow your mind, and she described that bunker where the Sandia security guard saw that UFO landed. She described the interior of that.
Okay.
She described bolts, the ladder. Now, she'd never been out there. She had nothing to do with the military, had no boyfriends, no contacts in the military. But she said she was abducted and taken to this location. Now, she didn't know where this was. She didn't know it was on Kirtland. But after listening to her and having a psychiatrist
Mm-hmm.
examine her and tell us that she's telling the truth, and then taking a polygraph examination, and we do the most advanced polygraph back in those days. Even now we do them. The intelligence community does them. That really will weed out whether you're lying or not. And she passed everything.
How do you feel about Leo Sprinkle and his technique, and was he reliable? Was he unbiased?
Leo was absolutely convinced that she was abducted, and she went to this location,
Mm-hmm.
and these things happened to her. She saw these vats of humans and aliens together. She saw infants in these smaller vats.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Leo was convinced. After listening to her, listening to the experts say there's something to what she's saying, I was a believer. But at the time, I hadn't been briefed into it.
Okay, so that's really important to hear. So your belief in all of this is not just from the film that was shown to you. You heard statements that could not otherwise be corroborated or confirmed other than that person having been on that base. Were there any other examples where you heard something and you said to yourself, there's no way they could possibly know this unless this actually happened to them?
Well, what I did was, when she explained this, I knew where this place was. I didn't tell her that. I didn't tell anybody in that room.
Mm-hmm.
So I immediately, now this bunker was an experimental storage structure for nuclear weapons. And how it worked is you'd open the doors, put the nuclear weapon on a platform, and it would go down 60 feet underground.
Okay.
And then there would be a cover over it. So if terrorists broke into there, they couldn't find a weapon. I went out there and looked. I took pictures. I looked at what she was explaining, the ladder, the bolts, everything she described was perfect. When I went down, now there wasn't any nuclear weapon in there, but I went down the ladder or the platform as an elevator. She told me there was a big hatch. If you open that hatch up on the bottom, that's where the aliens had the containers. So I looked over and I see this hatch, and I went through a lot. Nothing much scares me, but I was really apprehensive about opening the hatch. I thought, wow, we carry guns. We were federal agents. The guy that was taking me down there was the chief of security for Sandia, and he'd been a Marine Corps hero in Vietnam, and I looked at him and I said, "Let's open it." And he said, "You sure you want to open it?" I said, "Yeah." I said, "What is that for?" And he says, "It's an escape hatch. If somebody's caught down there, they open it."
Wow.
So we opened it up, but there wasn't any vats in there. It was just a crawl space where you could crawl the 60 feet back up to topside. So I thought, well, that doesn't fit her story, but maybe somehow it did. And I don't know. I just didn't understand it. But now a few days later, maybe 4 or 5 days later, two men come in to the OSI office. The OSI office is very secure. The security, our guard up front called me and said, "Mr. Doty, there's two people here to see you." And they have the red clearances. Red clearances are meaning they can come in. They have clearances. And there's ways of verifying it. So I go out there and I say, "Yeah, gentlemen." And they show me DIA credentials, Defense Intelligence Agency credentials. And they said, "Yeah." I said, "Come on in. What do you guys need to talk to?" He said, we're here to talk about Myrna Hansen case, the abduction case. I said, "Where are you guys from? What branch are you out of?" He said, we're on the abduction desk." I said, "You what?" He says, "We investigate abductions." I said, "You mean they're real?" Now, DIA has a desk that investigates abductions. So what do you think? Well, I'm convinced they're real. And later on, out of another incident that happened, I was briefed that, yes, there was a abduction phenomena, but that briefing wasn't as thorough as the first briefing.
So, okay. So when there's literally a separate investigatory person or committee that focuses on abductions specifically.
Yeah, there's a group, a bureau within DIA. I don't know how many field investigators. They don't call themselves agents. They're field investigators.
Okay.
I don't know how many field investigators they had, but they do. They investigate legitimate abduction cases, or they investigate the cases. And then I don't know what they do with the information because I never get it back.
Well, that begs the question then, is there one for cattle mutilation? Is there one for, CE5s? Is there a limit? How many segments are there?
Well, that would be compartmented, I guess, because I only knew of the abductions. I didn't know anything about, I had contact with, I had, to investigate. I shouldn't say I investigate. I had access to some cattle mutilations. I didn't investigate them, but there were agents within my office that did that. And so, like you said,
yeah,
they just had because we didn't know what the cattle mutilations were. I don't think anybody at that time knew. But they had a special training in how to examine the animal and so forth, which I didn't have.
Okay. So does that mean we're not going to get the answers we want through the Freedom of Information Act? Is there a way that they can avoid the release of documents to confirm this agency or this group's investigation into the phenomena?
if the government doesn't want you to know, they're not going to tell you. And there's countless cases of where I had people. We had every office has a FOIA monitor. It's like an additional duty.
Uh-huh.
And in our office, it was the person that handled fraud investigations for the Air Force. Now, actually, it was a different. It was in the OSI, but it was in a different, because we were in the intelligence area, and she was in another one. Anyways, she would come to us with a FOIA request and say, "Can you answer anything on this FOIA request?" Yeah. And all I had to say was no.
Nope.
There's a
crazy.
form I fill out, and I give it back to her.
Is that illegal though?
No, it isn't. It's absolutely not. No, there was and Title V United States Code, which deals with the FOIA, created in 1974, had a number of exceptions. Mm-hmm. And what happened was each agency of the government was allowed to create additional exceptions. There's a paragraph in FOIA that allows other agencies to exempt certain things. Now, it doesn't say how to exempt them. It doesn't say you have to tell them, oh, this is exempted. Now, most do, but other agencies just write their own plan saying, or their amendment to FOIA saying, no, just say no.
So that when we say that, we're not talking about just redaction. We're talking about complete denial or withholding information altogether.
Well, or what they'll do is they'll redact the entire document.
Okay, so this leads us into a question, Rick. I'm going to try to get these in because time is running short. So this is from Razor Revolution 1. Why does Rick think the U.S. government would keep this information, biological entities, not of this earth, hidden from the world? The world should know we're not alone.
If it was up to me, I'd tell everybody, but it's not up to me. Powers to be in some place decided the general public wasn't ready for it, and there's a lot of reasons for it. I guess if you told somebody, hey, 2,000 years ago, Jesus was placed here, and really Jesus was a spaceman from Zeta Reticuli. Well, what would that do to religion? I mean, there's a lot of repercussions.
I understand that. I do think that's an antiquated philosophy. I think it made sense decades ago, but I think now we're very primed and ready. There's always going to be someone who can't handle it. There's going to be someone who can't handle a pandemic or what have you. And I've been hearing this argument for so many years, but my gosh, Rick, like the world we live in today, that we're constantly, the world is going to end. Depending on what station you tune into, the end is nigh. Blame the libs, blame the conservatives, whatever it is. And we've been through a lot as a country collectively, through tragedy, through hardship, and very real. And I don't think that this is me speaking, right? I don't think that it would be a problem if they were to release that information.
Well, I feel the exact same way you do. And I'm talking about it right here, as others has. Robert Dean, Wendell Stevens, I can go on and on and on. Jeff Blake, Tommy. I mean, there are many people over the years. In 1992, a retired OSI agent gave a lecture. Robbins was his name. He, of course, since passed away, about the same thing I'm talking about. Nobody believed him. So, people say, no, that's no, I don't believe that.
Yeah. So here's a great question from UFOT. Is FOIA ever actually a disinfo outlet as well?
I don't know. I don't know. I don't think so.
Okay.
No. Well, be careful what you ask for. If you ask for something,
don't give anybody any ideas.
Yeah, exactly. If you ask for something, they may give you something that is pertains to that question that you're asking, but maybe something entirely different, and it will throw you off.
No, that was a great question, UFO2. Thank you. And I have a question from Android Purity. Is this the first time that you've talked about the Alien Abduction Department before?
No, I've talked about that for years.
Okay. And
Go
so,
back to 2006 UFO convention or 2000, and I've talked about it over the years.
why have you talked about this? Why did you decide you did your job, right? Why come out into the community now or then, and continually talk about this subject? Where are you coming from?
Well, I'm trying to bring the truth out. But there's people out there that are saying, well, if Doty says it, it's disinformation, which
Mm-hmm.
is, that's archaic.
But
You
could
go
you
back
can
to
you can understand
well,
their
no, I can't anymore. I can't
no,
because
okay.
I've explained it
Mm-hmm.
over and over and over again for many, many, many years. I mean, I had two websites. I had some fantastic information on the websites, and unfortunately, both of them were hacked by people
Yeah,
who,
yeah.
didn't like me, and I thought, well, I'm going to give up on that. But I've told the story. I provided the information.
Mm-hmm.
If they want to believe me, they can. If they don't want to believe me,
Yeah,
I'm not going to
I
force
gotta tell
anybody
you,
to.
like I'm laughing because as time goes on, you do kind of, and with podcasting as well, um, people do decide to create a narrative for you, and they're gonna do that no matter what, right?
You
And
should
so
see
you
some
just
of the emails I get.
I can't imagine. Um,
So most of them are really, really legitimate, and even the negative ones, I'll try to answer unless they
mhm,
are profanity laced and so forth, and I won't. But
right. Okay, so I want to ask you this question before we go, Rick, from Genghis Khan. Did Rick mention if they had any interest in particular rare earth minerals? We're talking about the extraterrestrials, or having a primary agenda for being here other than interacting with humans.
the only thing that I know that the ETs wanted, now I'm generalizing it because there are other races that we've had dealt with, is they seem to be interested in uranium
Mm-hmm.
and lithium back when I was in.
Okay.
Lithium was something new that we were earthing in Nevada, mostly in Nevada and in Africa. So they were interested in those two. But I'm sure others, but I didn't know of any others except for those.
Okay. My last question for you tonight, Rick. Bob Lazar, is his story legitimate?
I wasn't there. I was a, we know. I mean, if my critics can even Phil Class figure this out that I was in fact at Area 51. I was a counterintelligence officer out there.
Mm-hmm.
I had access to everything that was going on out there, with exception of some things. And one of the things that I didn't have access to was S4. Now, the only thing that Lazar's saying that is not factual is he's saying the S4 complex.
Okay.
S4 was a fourth level under the S2 complex. The S2 was the administrative control center for everything underground,
Okay.
S3, S4, and S5. Bob Lazar worked at S4. He had to go through S2 to get to S4. So I was at S2, but I've never been at S4. So that's the only anomaly that Bob Lazar talks about. And I've talked to him
Okay.
about this.
Uh-huh.
And I think there was just the fact that he's talking about S4 is within the S2 complex. So that's, and I've talked to a guy by the name of Gene Lakes, who was a security manager for that area, and he confirmed
Yeah.
that he did work out there. I don't know how long he did, but he wasn't there when I was there.
Is it possible to have been chaperoned in such a way that he would not have been privy to that?
No, because the only entrance now it's all underground from Area 51. You don't even have to drive out Papoose
Mm-hmm.
anymore. There's a road, 16 or 18-mile road underground, a tunnel. No, he would have to gone out there. He would have to gone through two security checkpoints, two Air Force security checkpoints, and then he'd have to go through the main entrance. If he's driving, the vehicles would be the hose would be hooked up, the vehicle would be parked. If it was electric, because they had interior, they had electric vehicles,
Mm-hmm.
and then he had to go to the elevator and go down S4. So
Okay.
no, he had to have gone through S2 to get to S4.
Okay, Rick. Yes or no answer. Is there life after death?
I wouldn't have an idea.
You have no idea.
No,
Okay,
I hope
Rick.
so.
Do you have any events coming up?
Yes, many. I have. We're making. I'm in the process of being involved in 2 movies. We had to stop them because of COVID. So
Okay.
look for 2 movies coming out probably next year pertaining to UFOs. One is a good science fiction movie, excellent, filmed out at Area 51. We're allowed to film inside, and another one is a documentary. And then I'm going to be in England on June 20th through the 27th for Chariot of the Gods, and I have other engagements.
Okay, Rick, if you could leave us with one thought before we go, what would it be?
Not all the ET races of visiting Earth are friendly. And Reagan knew about this.
Okay, we will leave it right there. Rick, thank you so much for joining me tonight.
You're very, very welcome, Alan. You have a great evening.
Okay, I appreciate it. And thank you all for joining us tonight, even with the delayed start. Hopefully, I will see you all this Saturday night at 9 p.m. for the premiere of the Half-Light documentary right here on this channel. All right, peace and love to everyone out there. And as always, live in the mystery.